Welcome to this episode of the Prodcast, Google's SRE production podcast. And let me say, we have a guest who's back again.
Nice.
From a previous season, Jessica Theodat. Jess, hello.
Hello, Jordan and Steve. Thanks for having me back.
So, Jess, you have a foot in two different worlds, I believe, security and reliability, everyone's favorite two worlds. These are the things that keep things going. Am I right about that? Or how would you better intro yourself than my silly analogy that we just did?
Yeah, no, for sure. So definitely in the two worlds. I guess one way to pitch it is that I'm a security-focused reliability engineer. And to kind of break that down, so on-prem, so I primarily focus on infrastructure and systems for Google's premises. So that includes things like data centers, in offices, colos. And in terms of responsibility, my role is to identify and assess and mitigate potential problems. And it's not strictly scoped to just security. I take a look at the bigger picture, right? I look at the potential effects of the bigger picture, and we'll dive into that a little more later, hopefully. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to risk management, it's not a one size fits all. And so fundamentally, the translation of security risks and reliability risks to business impact is highly contextual, right? And so the idea is that I help stakeholders in their teams understand what those risks are to their businesses, help them prioritize it, and implement strategies to address.
Nice. I thought it was funny that you said on-prem, because I know when people think of people who work at Google and then they think of the word on-prem, they think of like the stuff that isn't at Google. They think about their data center, but you're talking about the Google data center, which is the cloud on-prem, which is like the stuff that the cloud actually runs on, which I think is pretty cool. Like, so, for customers of cloud, Google has an on-prem also. It's weird, but it's the thing that all your stuff runs on. So that's a good point.
And we have the champion here.
That's it.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, for sure.
So SREs often claim reliability is the number one feature of any system. Is security feature number 0? Or where does that fall in the hierarchy now?
Takes welcome.
Oh, for sure. So interestingly, people often joke about this, but in reality, it doesn't actually reflect reality, right? I think what I found, having both sides of the fence now and at the intersection, that the two domains often pull each other in opposite directions. Mm-hmm. You have on one hand where security wants to resist and control, and then you have on the other hand where reliability wants to ensure availability, right?
Yep.
And what we're seeing, I think what we all see really, is that most orgs kind of struggle with this tension, and they usually over-index for one at the expense of another. And I think that the real challenge isn't ranking them, like which one is higher than the other, but rather actually finding the right balance between the two for your specific context.
Mm-hmm. As an SRE, I've been focused on reliability and availability and latency and all that stuff forever. And I've found that a good interaction with the security team is that we're both aiming for the same like big goal, which is like we want to protect the user, we want to like maintain the service level of the thing, and we want the service to actually be the right thing, right? We don't want it to be altered by someone else or whatever. And they're actually, it's all in the same purpose. Like we're on the same team, but I've seen it work poorly on the other side where, yeah, we're working on the same team, but like, we have our blinders on. We're only focusing on our thing. We're not being like holistic about it. And cases like this, you can see where teams are trying to, roll back a broken change or something like that, but they're like not able to because of a security control. And then when they say like, oh, we need to like go past the security control to allow us to like fix the thing, there isn't a way, right? And like, security says no, right? This is a common response, right? We want to be able to roll out a security patch very fast, bypassing the reliability concerns. Like we want to be able to push this patch to all the VMs at once, like right now, because this is really important because there's a thing out there. And the reliability team's like, no, you can't possibly do that. Same deal. So I think being aware of this, alignment is really, really important, and being able to like think about this ahead of time and being able to like say like, same team, everybody, let's go here. Does that resonate with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you really nailed it with that one, because the interesting thing about the two spaces is that, once you find yourself in a position where you have an incident and you need to compensate for something, they're both very difficult to bolt on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very difficult to then try to make your system more reliable if you didn't consider it in the early stages of your design, right? And the same is true of security as well. It's very difficult to make something more secure without having to necessarily redesign or refactor your entire infrastructure, which I've had experience with, and I will say it is a lot of heavy lifting.
Don't think this is fun to have to refactor a whole thing?
Fun.
Yes, fun.
And so these are sort of the things that we want to consider early on in the design phase of our systems, right? Like when we are approaching building different things, or we're attacking on different feature, what we want to do is essentially work with this like integrated thinking, where like you have, and you're considering the perspectives of both security and reliability, and you're optimizing for the two spaces.
Yeah.
And so part of that involves understanding what the trade-offs are and optimizing for those things, again, with an integrated mindset, right? And the benefit of doing all of this is that what ends up happening is you end up with a system that users implicitly trust, right? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, users don't care about your security posture, and they don't care about your reliability metrics. No, I'm sorry, okay. Steve. They just don't. They just don't.
Bummer.
But what they really care about is that the system works, and that it works securely.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This kind of reminds me of our last episode, actually. So considering risk in a system, and generally when we talk about risk in SRE, we're talking about availability and latency and all these other things, and like scalability and blah, blah, blah. Clearly, security is a pool of risk as well. So being able to think about just kind of risk in an abstract way, to say like, all the risks need to be looked at and considered, and ideally, mitigated and prevented over time. And regardless of, which side of the fence, or what did we call it? Having one foot on each side of, do you put feet on sides of fences? I'm not sure if that's possible, but being able to like consider risk on both sides of this is hard to do in an organization that has like two teams. So having someone, honestly, like you, Jess, that can kind of like, be the interface between those two teams, or at least say like, hey, do you know this other team exists, right? Like, is I think super important. So I've seen teams where they've had, people just be able to move between the teams. Like that I think is really helpful for groups out there in the world who want to try doing this, about just make sure you can have an engineer who was in reliability go into security, or the other way around, and just bring their understanding with them. And, most likely through some process of osmosis, you'll get a little bit more awareness of each side of this fence, or whatever we're calling it. Yeah.
And lean on your TPM too. If there's someone who is acting as like connective tissue, not to beat my own drum, but it sounds like something that's like, oh, did you know we have a team that does this already? Might be just the thing that you need to integrate into your system.
So given all that, like, how do you suggest, like, what have you seen in terms of these two teams, or these two like worlds or hats, or whatever you want to call it? How is the best way to get them to interact? Because I know it must be different from like, a startup versus a gigantic megacorp. Are there themes that can help these different teams interact with each other, or like maybe things to avoid, or something like that? What do you think, Jess?
Yeah. So I think you bring up a very interesting point. It does work. I find that it does work differently in small startups, or startups and small businesses versus like big companies, right?
Yeah.
In a small companies or a startup, is what you might usually see is that the same people who are handling the security are the same people who are handling reliability. And the advantage of that is that you have folks who are essentially considering the same domains, right? considering both domains rather. And because of that, that practice will most likely end up being part of your engineering culture rather than them, operating as separate functions. Whereas with larger companies, what we'll usually end up seeing is two different organizations, and the two have to be very intentional about their connection points, making sure they have joint planning, they're sharing metrics, and basically have a visibility into each other's goals, right? And one of the ways that teams exercise this is by implementing a review process that evaluates both security and reliability impact simultaneously. So going back to the same original idea, when we're approaching system design, we're taking in consideration both security and reliability risks, and we're optimizing for both. And part of that process is also evaluating what the impact of those optimizations are, right? Like both the impact of a security, both the impact of the optimization for security and for reliability. And then the other thing that I've seen, and Google has gotten, I think, really good about this, is about developing shared tooling so that we are eventually looking at things with the same lens, or through the same portal at least anyway, right? So like using things like automation frameworks, observability platforms, like we're looking at the same information. We may process them differently because we're working in different contexts, but more or less we're working with the same set of tools and information available to us, right?
Is this a hard to do thing, Jess? Is that what you're suggesting?
Very hard. I think it is very hard. But it's not impossible, right? I think, again, it ultimately just goes back to being intentional and understanding, like, what are your business's goals, and how do you shape your team and your cultures to speak to those things, right? I don't know, Steve. What do you think? What have you seen?
So I've seen, outside of Google, very distinct roles and very distinct tools, and the lack of ability to even see the other team's tools, let alone use them or understand them. Very common, very, very common. Inside of Google, I've seen a fair amount of overlap. An example that I like to share with customers that I talk to is when you're doing a security, think of it as a patch, not necessarily like a traditional patch, but like a security update, using the same rollout mechanism that you would use for product changes, as opposed to some other thing, like some security-specific rollout thingy. That's great. I think that's really good. That said, that rollout thingy needs to now know about like security mode potentially, right? So it might be able to need the ability to apply itself to, more than one, shard at a time or whatever it is. So this requires that the teams actually listen to each other in terms of, we have this requirement for that tool, else we have to go build our own tool over there, and it's not going to be as good, blah, 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 blah. So, having like a constraint system that allows you to like say, you're in this mode now and you're in this mode now, is a lot of software engineering, it turns out. Given all that, this I think leads us into our next point, which is, what about when we're doing incident response? And it's a security incident, not a reliability incident. Again, similar words, like probably similar tools, maybe. Like maybe you're using the same kind of like inside of Google, we have a tool called OMG, which is the best name for a tool like this, obviously.
Yes, definitely.
But what the security teams do is different from what the reliability teams do, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I know that there's a lot more like siloization of need to know information. So for example, like when I see a security incident, most of the time, it has a funny name that is clearly auto-generated by some program somewhere. Like the name has nothing to do with the actual outage. And that's like, I've heard on purpose. Also, like I can't see most of what's in that OMG. Again, it's probably not because they don't like me. It's probably because of some actual reason. So what's going on here? Like why does this happen? And is this a good idea? I thought we just talked about sharing information and stuff. Like why do we have to have all of this fancy secrecy stuff? Is this real, Jess? What's going on?
Yeah, so the sharing everything with everyone approach works for reliability, but that can actually harm your security response. And the reason for that is that threat actors are always listening and watching for your response, and sharing that information can tip them off. So compartmentalizing information isn't about bureaucracy. It's actually a tactic necessity, because you don't know which systems or comms or accounts they have access to, or who has access to what, right? And beyond that, teams need different information. Execs really only need to know or care about the business impact of an incident. Engineering teams need containment steps. And as your incident response progresses, you'll gradually, naturally, tag people in. But you'll do this on a need to know basis, because not everyone needs to know the full details of your attack.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, because I know I've heard the phrase "need to know a lot," and it sounds like kind of corporate junk. Like, come on, like I need to know a lot of stuff. I'm a curious person. Yeah, like
yes,
all the yellow tape, all the red tape.
But being aware of the idea that a reliability thing happens because a thing broke, or like code got pushed in the wrong place, or the config or whatever. That's like a passive-ish system. Like there's not the code's not listening to what you're talking about generally, I think. But in a security incident, that's always a possibility. Like it's possible that you have an active adversary in a security incident, which is fundamentally different. And that creeps me out. So I'm really glad that I'm on the reliability side and not the security side, because that sounds hard. So, hats off to you for actually going against the bad guys. I just like to say I'm a janitor. I just fix broken things. I don't want to deal with bad guys. That seems hard. It's
being responsive and being more creative, as you and I have talked about, Jess, before. In a security incident, someone has gone about this in a way that's not follow the rules. It's change the rules and break the rules to try to get that information. And reliability is about, I set this up to work this specific way. I need to make this thing available and accessible, which is very counter to how a person who is attempting to compromise security thinks. It's a very different script versus no script to follow, I think.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a good conversation, but I think we need to start to wrap things up a little bit. So, how do we solve this overall? Like we've got 2 minutes to solve all of reliability and security. Like, go. This should be easy, right? What should we tell people who are listening? Remember, the listeners of the podcast are generally SREs who don't work at Google, right? Or SRE adjacents. They're going to be DevOps teams, platform teams, software engineers, TPMs, CTOs. I don't know, lots of people. So, what should they think about when they're comparing their reliability teams and their security teams, or figuring out how to help them work together? What's the idea here? Especially in the context of AI, don't forget that. We forgot about the trend for a little while there.
Yes, we do have to.
For sure. So I think that the takeaway here is to recognize that it's not a zero-sum game. Ultimately, we're working towards the same thing, right? Ensuring that we earn and keep user trust.
So if I'm a CIO or whatever it is, titles that people use in the world, a VP or something like that, and I have a reliability team and a security team that I work with or work for me or something like that, like who do I fund more, right? Who do I tell is in charge? Like it seems this is a loaded question, obviously, right? Like how do I get them to work together? How do I get them to understand that they're both like important? Or do I just say like, good luck, everyone? Is there something here that we can give in terms of guidance around how these teams can work together?
I think the guidance here is to understand the trade-offs between the different decisions and the optimizations that you're doing, right? And mapping those back to the higher business goals. Again, because ultimately the reason why we're doing all of this is to serve a need, right? Or to fulfill a need for our users. And those are usually best described as business objectives or goals. And so we want to make sure that the strategies and the direction that we're heading in aligns to those things. And the way that you do that is by evaluating the different properties that speak to the goals and evaluating the trade-offs between them and understanding like how each decision impacts users, how each decision may impact revenue or reputation, and so on and so forth. And then what you do is you prioritize for the most likely and most impactful failure modes.
Oh, and this makes sense. Like knowing that, the thing that you expect to happen is the thing that you should definitely plan for. So it helps with the prioritization. It helps with understanding, which thing do I have to invest in?
But maybe we should think of something about that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jess, again, for coming back to us on the podcast. We are so thankful to have you. And we're so thankful to have you fighting to keep our tools reliable and secure. Appreciate you joining us again today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming.
You missed a page from Telebot.